Hi, family. How are you today? I am happy that you are joining me. I'll be sharing this to the Taking Care of Us page after I finish here. Um, I'm going to continue in the same vein I was talking about last Thursday. Today has been a particularly difficult day for me. Um, Taking care of us also means taking care of yourself. And so I've just been drained. This has required a lot of energy. As I've been sharing and talking with my children, um, I've been thinking that I remember seeing some of this when Rodney King was arrested during the LA riots. And I guess I don't, but more so I remember this when Martin Luther King was assassinated. And that was in 1968, and it lasted for quite a while. But we have had, hey Tani, how are you? We've had months of stressful situations. COVID-19 has been a lengthy process, and it's certainly not over. And hey Sherry, hey Keisha. And so I think what mostly frustrates me is people who don't want to hear or see or hear the heart cry of people who are tired of African Americans being killed by the police. And that's not all. It's not just George Floyd was a symptom of a much bigger problem. And for a lot of white people, and it could be for a lot of African Americans or black people, we don't know all of the history behind our racism. We just the racism, we just know it's there. But it's systemic. It's in every system that exists in America. And perhaps in other countries, but not like in America. When slaves were brought here, they were brought here specifically for capitalism, for work. And it wasn't, you read, for those of us who are Christians, we read about slavery in the Bible. That slavery was not forever. Every 7 years there was a year of jubilee, and slaves were set free, or were able to buy their freedom. That never happened in America. And even deeper, I was talking to a lady yesterday from Canada, and she was concerned why nobody was concerned about child slavery and female slavery at this point, and why it's not publicized the same way. And that, yes, that's a concern. Yes, that's a concern, but it's all part and part of the same thing. Hey, Glenn. Hey, Sherry. So, what I had to share with her, I want to share with you as well. During the time of slavery and during the time when our country was taken, the land was taken from the Indians, the status of the child went with the status of the mother. So in cases of, this is a person that we've all heard of, and that's Pocahontas. She was married to John Smith. She was Indian. Indians could not inherit land. So for the state of Virginia, the legislature, because John Smith was part of the General Assembly, passed a law that would allow John Smith's children to inherit from him because his mother was an Indian. Now, that's the only family that a law was passed for in order for them to inherit wealth. That wasn't done for anybody else. So there's a problem starting at that point. When you look at the Social Security system that was set up during the Depression, in order to get Southern votes, the legislation had to exclude people who were domestics and had to exclude people who were farmers in order to get Southern votes, because most blacks, if they were either domestics or farmers, so they didn't get Social Security benefits. Nobody had to pay in for them, and so that build up, that accrual of money that white people had, because white people didn't have it before, but that accrual of funds that white people had didn't happen for black people. And that was built into the system. And for some black people now, a lot of black people now, when you turn 65 and you're eligible for Medicaid or Medicare, that's the first time you have some paid health insurance, because too many corporations now will cut back on your hours, so you're not working a 40-hour work week, and they don't have to pay for health care insurance for you. So there have been studies now that prove that African Americans, black people who are on Medicare, their health improves between the ages of 65 and 70, because suddenly they are able to get health care. They are able to afford to go to the doctor. They are able to see a dentist. Those things are part of their Medicare policy. The American education system has been unequal. When during the time of slavery, it was against the law to teach slaves to read and write. Some owners did, maybe one person. Sometimes it was done so that a child who was in the house their companion, one of the slave children would be their companion, and so they could interact together. But even at that, if another slave taught other slaves to read and write, they could be killed. It was punishable by death. There's a book, The Invention of Wings by Sue Monk Kidd, if you have not read it. It is a fictionalized account of a young lady in Charleston, South Carolina. And it starts out with the slave child who had been her companion. On her 10th birthday, her mother put a ribbon around the slave's neck and gifted her to the daughter. This young lady eventually grows up and becomes part of the abolitionist movement. It's an excellent read, and it is a first simple read introduction into what life was like on all sides of the family. Our education system, once it was started, was not funded equally for black schools and white schools. In fact, a lot of black schools, there was no funding. There was no school. And so there were boarding schools set up. And so those blacks who could afford to send their children there did. But even today, schools are not funded the same way. And they can be in the same area. But if they don't have to be funded the same way, then they're not. And funding, even here in the city of Raleigh, you can tell if you're in a neighborhood where the school, the base things may be funded the same, But the extras, it depends on the neighborhood. If it's a white neighborhood and the base is white and has money, then the parents make sure that those children have all the extras that they can. If it's in a black neighborhood and the base parents don't have money, then those things are not necessarily provided for. There may be some attempt, but it doesn't always happen. And please don't let me forget the justice system. So for those of you who don't know, police and sheriffs were created to collect runaway slaves. They were not created, those positions were not created in America to protect and serve, which is what we're told now. And it is so frustrating as a black parent to teach your child, or for them to go to nursery school and kindergarten and first grade, and they learn about community, because that's the biggest thing they're learning about at that age, and they go to visit the police station, or they go to visit the fire station, and then within a couple of years you have to start teaching them the police are supposed to be your friends, but let me tell you these other things that you have to watch out for from the police. This is not new. This is not new. This is not and white people haven't had to deal with this. And that is part of your privilege. People say they don't have privilege. You have privilege. You don't have to think about this. You don't have to think about. When my child went for a walk yesterday and walked to Cameron Village, she was going to go for a longer walk, but she walked through Cameron Village and saw National Guard trucks, and she came back home. We're fortunate in my family that we live in Oberlin. We live in a community that was an the first all-black community built by slaves from the plantation after slavery was over. But, it's not a black neighborhood anymore. It's been gentrified. If I had to come buy a house in my neighborhood today, I couldn't afford to do it. If I have not been living there for the last 29 years, I could not afford to buy a house where I bought a house. And I want to finish talking about the justice system. The system was not put in place just to keep burglars and murderers, and that the system was put in place to keep those people who didn't have power down. Now, I'm not saying that people who do things that are against the law should not be punished. They should. But if you have plenty of money and you can afford to hire a good lawyer, a top lawyer, you got a house that you have paid for, even if you're paying a mortgage on it, you can put the house up towards a bail or a bond, or you can put the house up and get a loan to pay an attorney. And if you're black and you don't have that, you can't do that. So people don't not have just because they don't work hard. They don't not have. People are working 2 or 3 jobs to pay rent on a hotel room because they can't afford to live in the apartment or the house that they were renting because of gentrification. Because landlords keep going up on rent for crappy places that they don't pay for. The eviction system in America is a whole business. So I'm going places I hadn't intended to go. Read Evicted. That's a book. It's fascinating and it's horrifying. Read Slavery by Another Name. Read, there's a book by a lady named Kristl Tyler, Kristl Tyler. And her book is called The Wheat Money. It's an excellent read as well. And it talks about a black family and a white family. She is married, she's white, she's married to a black man. And it talks about both sides of their family and how they made their money and how they didn't make their money. Those of you who don't know about the Tulsa Black Wall Street Massacre, in, I believe, 1920. Google it. Read about it. There was a massacre in Wilmington, North Carolina in the late 1800s where the black Republicans, because Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, when black people were freed from slavery and they were able to vote, most of them registered as Republicans because that was his party. And let's not think that Abraham Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation because he wanted to free the slaves. He wanted to unite the country. That's what he wanted. He did not want, he was not against slavery. He was just against the fact that it was tearing the country apart. And he was trying to stop the Civil War. Okay, the Wilmington Massacre occurred because black people were in charge of government. It was a coup. It was a coup. And it was put together by Democrats. And the Democrats, including a man who became governor, were part of that. And they ripped up, killed, took care of killing people who were black, ruining their businesses in order to change the power structure. There is history that you don't know. There's history that you don't have to know. Learn. This week has been extremely hard for black people, for brown people. And if you know somebody brown or black, text them, call them, ask them how they're doing, and listen to the answer and listen with your heart. This is a battle, and it's a battle that black people and brown people cannot win by themselves. The white power structure has to be part of it. And don't think that if you're white, you don't have any control, or that you don't need to say something or do something. I'm not saying you have to go and protest, but you can protest other ways. Is your pastor saying anything? Is your boss saying anything? If you are the boss, are you saying anything? Do you see an issue in this country? Have you written to your congressperson? Do you know if your congressman or senator has made a statement? What about the stores that you patronize? What about the personal development leaders that you listen to? Have they said anything to reach out to people of color? And if they haven't, then ask them why. Does it not bother them that people have this angst? The last thing that I said, the other thing I wanted to say too, if you want to know, don't look for a diversity program. Look for an equity program. I have been through the Racial Equity Institute more than once, probably 3 times, and my eyes have been open to things. In America, we don't understand that race, when people came here from other countries except for slaves, when people came on their own, when they came as indentured servants, they came based on their nationality. The Irish came. The Irish were treated like dirt because they were considered poor and they weren't considered worthy. But the Irish recognized that they needed to be white, so they weren't treated that way. German people came. Polish people came. All of a sudden, though, they have all been assimilated as white, and slaves were black. We look at the color black as something dirty. It's not the prettiest color for us. And we need to figure out, why do we have those connotations? Who has made us think that way? Think about what you say. Think about what you do. But first and foremost, this week, if you know somebody black, you reach out to them. You ask them how they're feeling. You ask them, what do they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis? And if you see them smiling at work, it's because we learned that. We learned from our parents and our grandparents that you have to go to work, you have to keep a job, you have bills to pay, so you put the mask on, you put the face on, you don't let anything disturb you, you go and do what you have to do for your family. I did that for years. And the comments I would hear from behind the wall, or the comments nobody tried to not say ugly things. And I'm not saying that they called me the N-word or that, but it was just the mindset and the tone of the conversations that were horrible. And I had bills to pay. So sometimes I would say something when it was particularly egregious to me, and sometimes I would keep my mouth shut because I had bills to pay. Ask your black friends if they have to do that. I've told a number of friends today that I was tired and weary and exhausted and drained. And I cannot tell you how many white people have thought that because I grew up in a upper middle class, black household with a father who was a pharmacist and had a drugstore and a mother who was a teacher, that I had it better than they did. They have no idea the things I dealt with, the names I was called, the issues that went on in my life, traversing the road I had to traverse. And I am drained now from this talk, but and we're tired of teaching. We're tired of telling the stories. We are tired. But if that's our thing, then we're going to have to continue to tell the stories in order for you all to hear, then that's what we're going to have to do. And I'm going to end here. I do not like that there's looting. I do not believe that people who are protesting are all looting. I know that they are not, because I keep hearing from blacks and whites that that is not what's happening. What I do want to say to you, though, is if you've ever put a teapot on the stove and cut it up, whether you cut, the water begins to boil slowly and it builds up steam. If you do not take the pot off the stove, if you do not cut down the heat, the teapot is going to eventually dry up and explode. That is what you are seeing. People have not been listened to. People have not been heard. And if you don't start listening, then that's going to continue to happen. This is not the first time. It's happened with the English, the Tea Party, with the British and the Americans. This has happened around the world. And this is not something new. So I do not expect this to just go away. Do the work. Do the work. I want to thank you for listening, and rest assured, I will be back. Bye.